welcome to Grafted In, the program that explores the Jewish roots of the Christian faith. Did you know that Jesus was Jewish? His Hebrew name is Yeshua. Did you know that the Virgin Mary was Jewish? Her name in Hebrew is Miriam. Did you know that all the early apostles were Jewish? Did you know the Apostle Paul said that Christians were grafted in to the Jewish roots? Each week, Pastor Don and Donna Long will explore these and many more fascinating teachings about the Jewish roots of the Christian faith, as well as bringing you up to date on events happening in the land of Israel. This is a half hour you won't want to miss. And now, for today's teaching, let's join Pastor Don and Donna Long.
Hello, we're glad that you've come to join us on Grafted In as we continue our discussion about the Hebrew alphabet and Hebrew words and the meaning as we look at the Jewish roots of our Christian faith. This is Pastor Don Long, and once again I'm here with my daughter Jordan, and we're delighted that you've chosen to spend this time with us. You know, Jordan, we had a delightful time over the past 2 weeks talking about the Hebrew alphabet, beginning to talk about it, and Hebrew words. To kind of refresh our audience, we talked about the fact that Hebrew letters actually are words. Mm-hmm. And so that if we were to spell the word, for example, in English of dad, we'd say D-A-D. Well, D-A-D doesn't mean anything. It spells dad. But in Hebrew, if we were to spell the word for father, which is Aleph Beit, Aleph means something, Beit means something, we would have a word there that means the master of the house. Mm-hmm. So the letters in Hebrew actually are words that mean something. And furthermore, we talked about the fact that letters have numbers associated with them, and so the rabbis figured out very early that we can find associated words, and that enriches the understanding of the scriptures. So last 2 weeks, in fact, we were talking about the letter Shin. Yes. And we had a great time talking about it, but we ran out of time to talk about one of our favorite words that begins with Shin, which is what?
Shalom.
So do you want to start? You want to jump in, talk about Shalom and what it is?
Yes. We were talking about last week about how the word, the Hebrew letter Shin is on the mezuzah, and it stands for three things. Shaddai, it stands for Shomer, which is guardian, and it stands for Shalom, and we ran out of time to talk about the Shalom last time. But there's so much richness in the word shalom that goes far beyond what our English understanding is. Most people, you ask them what the word shalom means, and they'll say peace. Mm-hmm. Shalom means peace. But it means so much more than peace. As a matter of fact, if you look at the word shalom in Strong's Concordance, it means completeness, wholeness, health, peace, welfare, safety, soundness, tranquility, prosperity, perfectness, fullness, rest, harmony, the absence of agitation or discord. Shalom comes from the root verb shalem, meaning to complete, perfect, and full. In modern Hebrew, the obviously related word shalem means to pay for, and shulam means fully paid.
Whoa, so I mean, we could just spend this whole half hour on that. Mm-hmm. That if we look at Shalom, and we think especially of Yeshua, who in Isaiah is referred to as Sar Shalom, mm-hmm. Prince Sar of Shalom, mm-hmm. Prince of Shalom. Mm-hmm. And when we take those related words in contemporary Hebrew, Shalem meaning to pay for, mm-hmm. and Shulam meaning fully paid, and then he is the prince of that which is paid for, or he's the prince of something that has been fully paid. Mm-hmm. What a beautiful description of the atonement.
Exactly.
And mm-hmm. so to say, you know, he is our Prince of Peace. I mean, in English we think he's the Prince of Peace. We don't really think about atonement when we're thinking that.
Right.
He's the Prince of our personal peace or world peace or however you want to look at that. But to consider that the word itself is related to a word of paying for or mm-hmm. fully paid, right. In that wider context that you were sharing of completeness, that there's great peace when something's been paid for.
Right.
Mm-hmm. And certainly in terms of our relationship with Abba, mm-hmm. whereby there's a break in our relationship because of sin, mm-hmm. and we can be reconciled to God, to the Father, through the Prince of Shalom, the Prince of Peace, and to think that somehow that's connected with being paid for.
That's right. And if you think about it, in the word shalom, God is the God of shalom. He's the God of everything that's whole and complete. It's a part of himself. So when we talk about sin, he doesn't hate sin because it's wrong. He hates sin because it's shalom breaking. It's something that breaks the way things are supposed to be. It breaks the unity of things. So when we're talking about sin and getting sin out of your life, it's really getting out of your life anything that breaks the shalom.
Whoa, that's pretty powerful. So, shalom in that sense, we might say, peace be to you, and what does that peace mean?
Right.
But as a greeting in Israel, if you go there today, shalom almost is like hello, but it's also like goodbye. I mean, you meet someone and you say shalom. You're leaving and you say shalom.
Which is a sign of the cycle being complete. Because it means hello and goodbye, it's the blessing of shalom and everything that it means. When you speak shalom to somebody, because we know that there's power in our tongue, in our words. When we speak shalom to somebody, then we're releasing into them everything that shalom means, all the welfare, all the wholeness, nothing missing, nothing broken. And that's both when they're coming in and when they're going out. And you can see how that relates to the mezuzah. As the mezuzah is on the doorpost, and as you're going in and going out, you're reminded of the commandments of God and how he guards you going in and going out. Well, that wholeness, that fullness, and again represented by the shin that's on the mezuzah, it encompasses us when we go out in peace, and we come forth in peace.
Wow. So really, again, expanding those words that if I extend shalom to somebody, when I say to you shalom, I'm not just saying, how are you?
Right.
I'm really saying, I'm wishing upon you or praying upon you completeness, wholeness, health, prosperity, everything in your life brought to completeness. And then when I leave, again, it's almost like a blessing. It's a greeting and a blessing, all wrapped up in that word shalom. And when we go through that door again, I touch that mezuzah, I see the shin there, and it reminds me that I am to be coming into a home where there's completeness, where there's wholeness,
and I'm supposed to be bringing that into the home.
Right. So I carry harmony into the home, or let's put it this way: it's an absence of agitation.
That's right.
So,
but it's not just the absence of agitation and nothing else. Shalom is more the presence of someone coming and filling the void. It's the presence of someone coming and making everything complete. So in that sense, it's more than just the absence of something. It's the presence of someone,
So I'm coming into the house, and I should be bringing the presence of God into the house. When I'm leaving the house, I see it, and again, I'm taking the presence of God with me. I think of Mom who says to you, has all the time, and to all your siblings as well. Whenever you go out the door, it's remember who you are and remember whose you are. So within the environment of our home, there is the context of shalom in the house.
That's right.
Of constant learning, constant teaching, of wholeness, prosperity, the things that we allow to come into the house, the music that's playing, the teachings that we're listening to, are all creating an atmosphere of wholeness and completeness. And so that when you go out into the world, you are carrying that wholeness and completeness with you. You're not just out doing your thing, but you're carrying the presence.
Right. And you're carrying it with you so that the people in the world who don't know the author of Shalom, they don't know the God of Shalom, so that you can be a witness to him. And if you bring it into their atmosphere, you're providing them the opportunity to choose him if they want to.
So you seem to be indicating that that shalom is tangible. Shalom is something that even a non-believer can know they're in the presence of shalom.
A lot of people tend to think of the idea of peace as we know it as the idea of sitting on fluffy clouds and everything's just flowing in harmony. But it's much more than that. And when you're in the presence of someone who carries the shalom with them, you can sense it. It's almost physical, almost is very tangible. You know that it's a very strong thing, which it sounds strange to think of strong peace.
Right.
But the very presence of everything that's right, everything that's complete, that's what you're in the presence of when you're in the presence of someone who has shalom with them.
It's very tangible, as you say. I can't tell you how many times over the years we've had workmen, maybe a repairman coming in for the furnace, or somebody's coming to deliver something, but with whom we have no relationship. And they'll come into the door of the house, and as they step in, how many times have we seen workmen just look around and say,
it's really nice.
It's really nice in here, and they're not talking about the furniture's nice or the decorations are nice.
And they don't know how to put it into words.
Right.
It's just really nice in here.
And sometimes people we would look at as maybe being very earthy, but there's an atmosphere that we've created within the walls of the house.
It makes them feel secure.
Right, marked by that, again, the shalom when you enter.
That's right.
That when they walk in, they know it's there. Now, you know, I know our audience knows that in the negative. I'm sure you've had the time when maybe you've gone into a friend's or a relative's house and they've been fighting. And even though they greet you at the door and they smile and how are you and they're being very pleasant, you describe it this way. You could cut the tension with a knife. You could feel it. You walked in and it's like you're kind of wondering what's going on here. And you can't put your finger on it. They're talking nicely to each other, but there's an atmosphere. Well, shalom is that kind of an atmosphere. And shalom absolutely then changes the environment because it's so unusual in the world.
That's right.
That when you enter into a place of shalom, as you say, Jordan, it's tangible. It's a tangible presence of God expressed through the word shalom. Now, I think we've experienced that in places the world wouldn't expect, like in Israel. I mean, I think of times when we've been in the West Bank, so-called West Bank, Judea and Samaria, where we've been in places where we're in a community, and the community is surrounded by villages that are filled with hatred. Hatred for the Jewish people. And in fact, when you drive through those villages, there's an oppressive spirit that is present. As
tangible as the shalom is, that's how tangible the oppression is.
And you come out of that and you drive suddenly into an Israeli community sitting on a hilltop, and there's a different atmosphere to the whole community. And when you talk with the people, seems to be a different dynamic that is happening among the people. You're in a place of shalom.
That's right.
And again, it's not simply a Hebrew word. It's not simply a, hi, how are you? But because the word shalom is being spoken daily, many, many times during the day, think about it.
That's right.
The very way they greet each other is speaking into that community shalom.
In many cases, you say, hi, how are you? That would be shalom ma shalomcha, which literally means, how is your peace? So you're saying, shalom, how is it with you? Is all well with you? Is everything well?
So you would say that to me in what way?
Ma shalomcha.
Ma shalomcha. And what you're asking me is not just how it's going. You're really asking, how's my wholeness?
Yeah, are you whole? Is everything well in your life?
Is everything well in my life? And how would I respond to that?
You would say tov or shalom. It is well.
It is well.
In the scriptures where it talks about the Shunammite woman and she said, it is well. In English, that's 3 words to us, but in Hebrew, it's 1 word, shalom. So when they asked her, Ma shlomcha is everything well? Is everything well with your family? She said shalom, which meant there's completeness, there's fullness, there's everything that we need is in our family.
Now that's an amazing confession of faith. It certainly lines up with our view of scriptures. But the fact that she made that comment when in fact
Her son was lying dead.
her son was lying dead in the house, and she's on her way to the prophet to see if the prophet has an answer or what the prophet's answer is going to be. But when addressed, how is your completeness, how is your wholeness, how is your peace?
Everything is whole.
Everything's whole. Everything's well. So she used the word shalom to decree and declare.
That's right. She literally stepped out of time when she said that. She stepped out of this time dimension and saw that because she knew the God of the more than enough, the God who was her provider and sustainer, she stepped out of this time realm where it looked like everything was falling apart, he's dead, and she was able to say, no, he's saying shalom.
So she was the word shalom in that case absolutely opened up a new dimension of life. And it's not shalom based on what I see. It's not shalom based on what I feel, or shalom based on my circumstances. It is shalom is a spiritual word.
It definitely is.
And it creates a physical reality. So I don't wait for the physical reality and say shalom, but I speak shalom, and it changes the atmosphere. That's right. And turns it into an atmosphere of shalom.
That's right.
Well, we should have an English word like that. You know, the words that we get out here, I think another one that maybe people have heard is Shalom Aleichem. And again, like you said in the previous one, Shalom Aleichem literally means peace, my friend, or shalom, my friend. But what you're really saying is wholeness be upon you, my friend. So it's not just a matter of greeting, but it's a matter of extending something to someone else. On Shabbat, the Jewish people will most often say Shabbat Shalom. Well, what are they saying? That there's a wholeness and completeness in Shabbat itself. Shabbat Shalom is different than another kind of Shalom.
And it means so much more than just Sabbath peace. You know, Sabbath peace be upon you, but you're releasing into them, may the wholeness, may the completeness of the Sabbath be upon you.
So we don't tend to think in English of our words releasing things. They're words. We're using them to communicate. In the Hebrew, we're communicating a whole dimension of blessing beyond that. And, you know, I think often that the disadvantage, therefore, when we come to our English Bible is that we're choosing English words out of necessity, but the words themselves are limited in their scope and ability. Whereas when we look at the Hebrew, we find out, whoa, something was being said well beyond that.
That's right.
So when Yeshua said, peace I leave you,
my peace
I give you, he's really saying shalom, shalom be unto you, and my shalom. Well,
think about that.
Think about his shalom.
That's right.
It's completeness and wholeness and health and prosperity.
That's the shalom that enabled him to walk through the crowds and they weren't able to touch him. That enabled him to go to the very depths of hell without being afraid. That was the shalom that he had.
Well, that was the shalom that he spoke over a raging storm.
That's right.
You know, he didn't...
He said, shalom, be still.
Right. To the storm, he didn't stand up to peace be unto you and wave a peace sign.
Right.
But he literally spoke shalom out into that storm, and the words and power of shalom overtook the storm, and it quieted down.
That's right. And you think about that, how he said he left us his shalom. And he also said that the works that I do, you shall do also, in even greater works than these. So it may not be a physical storm you're facing, like on the sea and all that, but whatever storms in life, we're the ones who are supposed to dictate with the words of our mouth. We're supposed to stand up in the middle of the situation and speak shalom and wholeness into it before we see it with our natural eyes, before it appears in manifestation here. If we speak the shalom into that situation, we're calling it into alignment with Him.
So shalom then is a word that counters the negative.
Right.
I'm looking at this list again of what it says for shalom in terms of completeness and wholeness. Completeness, wholeness, health, peace, welfare, prosperity, safety, tranquility. So if I come into a place of brokenness, I enter a situation of brokenness, then the word that I should be decreeing is the word shalom.
Because shalom also carries the idea of restoration. I see that in many places where it's talking about how shalom is restoration. It's restoration to the order it's supposed to be. Restoration to the completeness where it's supposed to be. And all of that is wrapped up in that.
So I can then use the word shalom as a counter to negative things. Walking into a hospital where someone is sick or dying, then the word that I should bring is the word shalom. And it's not just that I try to think I'm carrying shalom, but I speak the word. And when I speak in that hospital setting, shalom, I'm speaking health. I'm speaking life where there may be death. In a place where there's a lot of agitation, if I speak shalom, I'm speaking words that are like oil on troubled water. They're going to, that very word shalom is going to begin to
encompass it,
calm it down. The word shalom is one of the most powerful words then that as God's people we should be speaking.
That's right.
It's far more than a greeting.
It certainly is. And with a lot of Hebrew words, the way they're made up in their intonations and in how you pronounce them, there's certain words that have a breath behind them. Like in our English words, we just have words and they're just solid sounds and all that. But with Hebrew, like for instance, the word ruach, which is Holy Spirit, the breath of God. Even the very word ruach, you get that breath that you're sending out. Same thing with shalom. Shalom. It's just there's a flow that God created behind the very word itself that releases the breath of God into it.
So there's something intentional about that. I'm not just
saying a word.
Yeah, and I'm not casually just throwing out the word shalom. I mean, not to say that people don't do that, but we can say it with intention, as opposed to shalom, shalom, or shalom aleichem, is to shalom, to look someone in the eye and to say the word shalom. I'm imparting again something much bigger than the word itself.
Right. And very interesting, there's many other contexts where they use the word shalom in sentences, but the phrase, and it's used throughout the scriptures in several different places where it talks about my close friend, my trusted friend. That's literally man of my shalom. Ish shlomi is the phrase. So when you're talking about somebody who's your close friend, who's you trust, like one that you trust, it's the man of my shalom, man of my completeness, and you think of all the richness that's in that.
Wow. Ish shalom.
Ish shlomi, my shalom. The shlomi is my shalom.
So you're the man of my peace. What would that be for a woman?
Isha.
Shloma. Isha shloma. So that would be a great phrase for a husband and wife, for example, to be referring to each other in that. You're the man of my peace, you're the woman of my peace, of my shalom, of my completeness, of my wholeness, of my prosperity, of my blessing.
Someone who makes me complete.
So much more meaning in that in the Hebrew than if I were to introduce my wife as, this is my wife, she's my best friend. Well, that conveys something, but not nearly as rich as she's my shalom. She's my
complete. She's the one who completes me.
Completeness, wholeness, and prosperity. Whoa. That's pretty cool. Where'd you learn that one?
In my research on Shalom along the way.
One of the fun things we have is looking at words, and I would encourage you to do that as well. You know, there's different kinds of books that you can get. I have one here. It's called The Wisdom in the Hebrew Alphabet. And it's written by Rabbi Michael Munk, and it takes you through the different letters, what the letters may mean, and what the wisdom is underneath those letters. Something, again, that you need to get into the Hebrew mindset in order to understand that. And as we've talked often here on this Jewish Roots broadcast, that Paul was very clear that as Gentiles, we've been grafted into Israel. And when you're grafted into someone, you want to be like them. You want to get all the wealth of that. The image he uses of the olive tree, of where we were wild olive tree branches that are grafted into the root of Judaism, the root of Israel, and that we don't contribute to that, the root contributes to us. So all the nourishment comes out of the root into the branches. And when Constantine and others in the early church severed that relationship and broke away and said, we don't want to have anything to do with God's people, we don't want to have anything to do with Israel, we don't recognize any connection to our Jewish roots, then that branch was left to kind of survive on its own. And it doesn't have all that rich nourishment. And so we abandoned the connection, we abandoned the Hebrew in the process, and we went over to a Greek mindset with the Greek language. And the Hebrew language, which is rich and vivid and extensive, got replaced by a rather technical, narrowly defined language of Greek, where all the nuances are lost and we have these precise little words that may or may not mean things. So we've lost the richness. When all of a sudden you realize that Yeshua was Jewish, and that more than likely he was speaking Hebrew. Some people think he may have spoke Aramaic. He certainly might have in some places, but Hebrew was a common language for the people. Certainly the scriptures were in Hebrew. And when the early apostles went out, and Paul himself, he's a Hebrew-thinking man. And he's struggling to take Hebrew words and Hebrew concepts and put them into the Greek language which the Gentiles used. And many times you can see the struggle, because he's using 5 or 6 words in Greek to try to convey one word in Hebrew, and even then it doesn't quite capture the wholeness of the meaning. So when we come to a simple word like peace in English, and we can read our Bibles over and over again, and peace I leave with you, peace I give you, speaking peace to the storms, peace can have such a limited view for us. But when we then turn into the Hebrew and say, let the Hebrew speak to us,
Right.
we find that a word like shalom then all of a sudden starts to filter in through all of our daily walk. It's more than a word. It's a method of conveying who we are, who God is, and it's a word that literally can change the circumstances in which we find ourselves. Well, this is Pastor Don Long with my daughter Jordan. We've been glad to have you with us today, and we would say to you, Shalom.
The members of Faith Christian Church thank you for joining us for today's broadcast. We trust the message has been encouraging, the discussion enlightening, and the news informative.